Without doubts, I think it's by far the best league in England.
How dare you score like that in the Premier League? Mission accomplished in the Premier League. The American.
Scouser.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the ASTV's Premier League Show. I am your host, Gally, and I'm coming to you from what is a pretty spring-like Massachusetts. It stopped being Seattle, Washington, so which is nice. So we are not getting rain. Sun came out, gave us about a day and a half worth of it. I'm sure there'll be some more rain in the forecast soon. Mr. Bickler, how was your Monday?
It was good. We're on to the rain. We started, like Friday night, and we're supposed to get rain all the way through tomorrow. So yeah, we're under it here, and of course we're low-lying coastal region, so half of everything is flooded, which is a good time.
And leave it to us to sit here and talk footy for a couple hours on Monday nights like we normally do, whine about weather and rain when it hasn't rained in England in what probably feels like a lifetime, because I know like a buddy of mine that doesn't watch a lot of it, but is in the pub enough with me at hours that I'm watching it, which is the nicest way I can say this guy likes to drink in the AM. He said to me the other day out of nowhere, like, man, I haven't seen one of those like sideways rainstorms in a while when we watch one of these games. What's going on over there? I'm like, they're basically as like a countrywide drought at this moment in time in England. And basically, I kind of told him, if you ever want to go to England for vacation, May and June is pretty much the only times you can do it. So let's get at it. I did want to do it a little different this week. We've done 30-something weeks this season. We've done a lot of match recaps. And to be totally honest, outside of a few key races and storylines, there really isn't too much to talk about at this point when it comes to the Premier League season. I feel like most of the talk around Premier League teams is really about what's going to happen next year. And we have all summer to talk about transfers and contracts. But one of the more enticing stories, both, I think, sensationalistically because it was blown up, and, of course, because it does dovetail with a team that actually is in a top 5 race, was the images, and let's be fair, anyone who's been a long-standing listener to this pod knows I will find any excuse to bring up Evangelos Marinakis, otherwise known as the Crazy Greek. I like to call him Bedsheet because that's what he wears each and every time he goes out in public. He just basically pulls the sheet off of his bed, has like one of his butlers sew a neck piece, and then he basically wears it like a toga, which is also just great because he's Greek, right? So that just makes it all that much more entertaining. Did you see this? Did you hear the reactions? Before we get into the crazy overreactions from the Nevilles and from some of the other people in the national media, I ask you, Paul, straight up, when it comes to large Greek owners, do you need them as passionate as him? Is that too much passion? Displaced passion? Like from an owner, do you want your owner walking on the pitch regardless of circumstance at the end of a key match? And does it help the club?
I mean, you're looking at a country who breaks plates as an expression of joy, right? So I feel like you have to temper your expectation of like what to expect from them. I think we're a little bit more like broken into this idea as Americans because we have some very big personalities who own sports teams and like to be at the forefront of just about everything, right? So I think this maybe like is not as shocking to us. Where I think I have a huge problem with this is the fact that, like, I don't know if I have as big of a problem with him going onto the pitch as I do, like, confronting your own manager after a disappointing result in that setting just invites so much gross criticism across the board. And I think, like, you're essentially you're essentially airing your dirty laundry. And I think given you can say Marinakis, he deserves some degree of credit here with this Forest side because of his commitment to continue investing in this side from a financial standpoint, right? They've really been aggressive. But I also think that you look at this side that had 16 fullbacks at one point, and you have to give some degree of credit to Nuno and how he's constructed this team and how they've gone ahead and punched well above their weight all season. And I think to see the owner go after the manager in the manner he did right after the whistle, to me, seems like deeply unprofessional on all accounts, no matter if you're the owner or you're the water boy. I don't know.
Yeah, it didn't seem right to me. I do understand on some levels, like immediately after it, right? So you have Gary Neville tweeting out that Nuno should be negotiating his exit from the club tonight. Like literally saying this, like in a tweet. He is in the gantry at Anfield ready to do the match. So he has no context. He has talked to nobody in the grounds. And he is literally just blasting out like totally unacceptable, totally wrong, shouldn't be happening. Now, I won't lie, other than the messenger itself and not really caring for Gary Neville or his kind of rhetoric, I could sympathize with him from the standpoint of like, it isn't a good look. To your point, it is unprofessional, probably shows up the manager. Now, when you fast forward 10, 12 hours and you start to get more of the story, you do find out that like he wasn't actually criticizing Nuno for managing or the result. I guess former Liverpool player Taiwo Awoniyi, and I never pronounce his name correctly, but we all know who I'm talking about. He was subbed onto this match as they were chasing the goal. And supposedly he was injured during the match. The physios went out on the pitch, and the physios determined that he could continue. It has since come out that he basically, I think he tore his meniscus, and he now needs season-ending surgery. He's going to be out for a long period. And I guess from all accounts, the frustration wasn't actually at Nuno. It was almost this passionate owner coming out like, how did this happen? He was mad at his other staff. Now, to your point, I still think it shows a level of unprofessionalism, but it's why I asked you, is it too much passion? Not where as a supporter do we want it? If we had that context, would Gary Neville have asked Nuno to step down if really he was mad at physios? Because it sounds to me like there's an owner protecting his players and kind of protecting the fact that they're going for this big prize and almost like saying, I might have let us down because these are my people.
Yeah, well, and I think there's a mixture of both, right? I think it was partially like him asking questions about what happened with the physio, but I think he was also coming at the manager like, why did you leave him on if he wasn't, and I think at the end of the day, regardless of the conversation and the mishmash between the two sort of situations, I think what I want from my owner is the same thing that I want from my manager. And that's some degree of emotional regulation, right? And I think after, the bottom line is and I get it as somebody who recreationally bets money on sports, there's no way that you would not have your money on Forest beating Leicester at home with everything on the line for them this year, right? This is a Leicester team that went 6-7 matches without scoring. This is a toothless championship level and probably low table championship level side. They're not a good football team. So with everything on the line to go ahead and draw this match, especially the way they drew it
at home,
in front of your own supporters, I can see if you have an owner who's passionate and maybe Greek, how this goes off the rails, right? But at the same time, that's what I want from my owner. The same thing that I want from my manager, some degree of emotional regulation to take the wind out of this thing. Have those conversations behind closed doors. I don't think that the support and the fan base needs to see any sort of division between an owner and a manager in a year where you expected to be relegated by most pundits and you're sitting here fighting for European qualification.
The best line of all of this back and forth was Nuno's response to Gary Neville's comments when the reporter asked him, did you hear what Gary Neville had to say and that he feels that you should be negotiating your exit tonight? And he laughed and he said, Gary's been a manager before. I know this because he replaced me after I was fired at Valencia. For that short period, he was on the sidelines.
Yep.
Gotta love yourself a little Nuno there. And maybe Nuno is being found out. Maybe we were too quick to give him all of his plaudits and maybe too quick to give him all his blame after he failed at Spurs and then he got hired here at Forest and we were like, okay, they're just gonna they hired a championship manager to be their manager when they go back to the championship. Boy, did we get that one wrong. But you gotta love Nuno because he does speak his mind and he's not afraid to be his own person. And what he's done with that side has been nothing short of miraculous, to be honest. And it's an incredible achievement. And speaking of that achievement, it kind of takes me to the second topic I wanted to have with you tonight, Paul, which is what level of Europe is too much Europe? So hear me out here. Because I constantly hear about how it's every team's dream to make the Champions League. And qualifying for the Champions League has never been more worthwhile because of the payday, the prestige, and clubs like Brighton and Brentford even, and folks that have been on the outside looking in, Villa, Newcastle, they have the ability now to say crash the party and get in. But I guess what I want to pose to you as a question is could the best thing for Nottingham Forest this season actually be missing out on the balloon payment of Champions League, but that might jettison them into a level of competition that their club is not ready to compete at? So in turn, yes, they may hang on to a few players, but they also may have to overinvest, overinflate a squad that if a year from now they don't requalify. So like if they go one and done the way Newcastle did, or the way it looked like for a long period Villa might, like I guess my question is are you better than going the West Ham route that they were doing under Moyes, where they were incrementally advancing for a period of time in Europe that culminated with them winning, the Conference League and qualifying for the Europa League and then making it to the quarterfinals the next year. Now, it fell off since then, but I almost feel like these clubs make it. And if they get there too fast, it almost can be a detriment to them to the point where their league campaign struggles and they don't really have a chance of advancing in that European tournament where, hell, let's be real, Forest had a chance to win the Europa League this year if Spurs and United can do it.
Yeah, I think the original question is like, what level of European competition is too much? For me, it's the conference. I understand why we have it. I just don't think it's good for football, for a number of reasons. And I think when we look at what does it take for these sides to compete now? And we look at a side like Forest, what would similarly how we look at West Ham and how European competitions really negatively affected that side, right? I think as a football fan, I look at it as just another layer of strategy that these clubs have to consider and prepare for. How do we grow this club in a way that's sustainable, that allows us to compete on these funds and snowball that money into building the squad, right? But also, the pessimistic side of me looks at this and says, this doesn't have anything to do with these clubs having strategy to figure it out as much as it has the people at the top making more money with all these fixtures, right? Yep. And that's the money trail. And we can say oh, it's interesting because these clubs have to figure this out in this unique way. And it adds this new wrinkle for clubs. At the end of the day, it's all just about the money. And that's the sad thing to me, because I think it's unfair to these sides that are coming up, like the Forest or the West Ham or what's going to happen here with Villa potentially. It makes this so hard, not only to attain, and I think the attainment's one thing, but to sustain it is the second half. And I think that's the really tricky part. These clubs can go and attain this magic, but they can't sustain it. And I think that's the worst part about it.
Yeah, and I think that's where I almost feel like if if Brighton could squeak their way into the Champions League or finish in 6th place and go into the Europa League with a legitimate shot of going far in a tournament they can actually win, I almost feel like if you're Tony Bloom and you're the board at Brighton, like it's better to just go on a run like Spurs and United just have. Get a year under your belt, play a bunch of teams in Europe, get all those extra gates, actually build up your squad, build up your stamina in the league so that hopefully you win this competition. And I guess I'll spin that to you. I personally enjoyed this year's Champions League from the standpoint of I didn't think I would like the Swiss format. I thought there was way more peril in the group stage, if you want to call it that. I liked that you played 8 different teams. I liked that it was randomly drawn, even though every major draw I knew was going to happen. Just like I will guarantee you right now, when those balls come out and the 10 random matches happen, about November of next year, Real Madrid will be coming to Anfield because that computer is going to make sure that Trent Alexander-Arnold plays at Anfield next year. Like there's a guarantee in that, right? Like it's an absolute guarantee. It was not even a question of how those random drawings will happen. I like the format, but the thing I liked the most was I like that the teams didn't parachute into the tournament below them. I like that you were in the Europa League, and if you qualified for Europa, you knew you didn't have to worry about getting 8 of the best teams not to qualify for the Champions League group stage. And I like the fact that they give the automatic place. I know a lot of people, are bemoaning the idea that England will get 6 teams in. But I think the only way you make the Europa League and the Europa Conference, for that matter, have any credence is by using kind of the pro-rel mentality that you can progress yourself into the next tier of European football if you take it seriously enough to win it. Do you have a problem, one, with England having 6 teams out of 36 in the tournament? And 2, do you have a problem with the automatic qualification regardless of league form and or positioning if that's the rule at the beginning of the tournament?
I mean, I think I could probably dissect this a little bit more, but like on the surface, I don't have a problem with it because I think they do a good job of weighting the leagues fairly. I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of the parachuting into the next competition below. I'm just not. I think it's like it feels unfair to these teams that didn't make the Champions League, right? Like they should have a shot to win something, and then it's like if you're just parachuting the teams that like are the reason they're not in the competition and they got to play them. Like to me, in the face of that, that feels unfair, and that's I think probably what I have the most problem with in terms of like the construct and setup of it.
That's why I don't mind the automatic promotion in, because I think it makes teams take it seriously, especially now that it has this long run out of a group stage. I always hated it when like you'd get to the quarterfinals and 6 of the 8 teams were the teams that finished 3rd in the Champions League. And it's like, wait, and now Lazio gets another chance to make the Champions League next year by winning this Europa League after bombing out of this year's Champions League. And it just never felt right. I remember one year, I think it was Inter Milan came down and made it all the way to the finals. And I was like, come on. Inter was probably like a favorite in their group. And they're playing in the Europa League semifinals or finals because of this. So I agree. I think the automatic promotion to the next stage has given the tournament a little bit of cachet. It definitely has helped elevate the Europa League for sure, because teams take it a lot more seriously. We're paying a lot more attention because of the EPL-centric storylines, with it being Spurs and United, of course. So quickly, I will ask you, Paul, as a Liverpool supporter, is it more about laughing at United fans who have to acknowledge that they lost a European trophy and they lost it to Spurs? Or is it laughing more at Arsenal supporters that Spurs won a European trophy before they did?
Oh man, can both be true? Well, it's like I need the why not both meme. I think
Well, you get both if Spurs win. So I guess I'll ask you, is Spurs going to win this final 6-5, or is this going to be a little bit of that? Unfortunately, the cream rises, and at the end of the day, at a final, United find ways to win, and Spurs finds ways to lose.
I got to tell you, I have way more reason to believe that United will do the business than Spurs at this point, given just how they looked against Palace, how they've continued to look down the stretch here. This is a side that should be really exciting offensively, no matter who they put in that back line. And unfortunately, that's the thing, is they just look so toothless going forward right now. And you can explain away the back line. I have a harder time explaining why this team can't consistently create goal scoring opportunities. And I think, as much as I'd love to be like a Spurs fan here for the next couple of days and just watch this unfold in the way that just makes us all very happy on this side of the fence, I think United probably gets this thing done.
Yeah, I won't be shocked at all if they do win it. I will say Spurs have put a number of goals up on United this year. I think they've beaten them 3 times in all comps. So it would be the first time Spurs did the quadruple over any side in England in like a decade. So that also doesn't bode in their side. I will say the injuries to De Ligt and Euro, potentially having to start, Lindelof and Luke Shaw and Harry Maguire at center back. Getting Son back might help if he's at least even able to give you something from the bench. You got to hope your captain can start. If they could have Son, Solanke, and Johnson starting, going against that defensive line, I just still think Ange hasn't figured it out. He went away from playing Kulusevski, which makes no sense, seeing that he's been the best player at the club since the day he put the uniform on. It just, to me, there's a lot left to be asked for. I still think if you gave me a choice between the two rosters, I'd still take Spurs' roster, especially with who's fit and available. You just got to hope that.
Do you think Kulusevski makes this match? I know he went out. He went out injured like early in the last.
And that's a whole nother thing. I don't know. And that's, and they each have to play another match on Friday, so you never know. And I have to imagine those are going to be a couple ugly, ugly matches Friday afternoon in the Premier League. But kind of dovetails us to our last topic of the night, which is, we've had this slide before. The only thing that changed is the order. Newcastle, City, Chelsea, Villa, and Forest. So we know that 3 from 5 will make it. There was still a dream if Liverpool had beaten Arsenal and Chelsea drew with Newcastle, that there was a mathematical equation that Arsenal would have finished in 6th place and missed out on the Champions League completely. Unfortunately, that will not be the case. Arsenal has guaranteed qualification into Europe's top tournament next year, which is great for Mikel Arteta. He can tell everyone they were the best team, even when they don't win it, and when they lose to the eventual winner. Newcastle has Arsenal away, home to Everton. City has Bournemouth, and I forget who they play the last game of the season, but I'm sure they're going to win it because they're City. Chelsea, United away, United away on the road to Forest, Villa, Spurs, and United. If I told you right now which teams on the outside looking in, which teams, playing in the Conference League, which teams playing in Europa, which 3 get those Champions League spots, Paul? And maybe why?
I'll go Newcastle, Manchester City, Aston Villa as your Champions League teams. I think it's going to be Chelsea and Forest down here at the bottom. And I think the one that makes it, I really think this is going to come down to the last match of the year with Chelsea and Forest. That's going to be like an absolutely massive match for both clubs. There's just a huge part of me that wants to see Chelsea miss out here, given how they've done their business over the last few windows. I would love nothing more. Not that I have any faith that we will hold anyone accountable for skirting any sort of financial rules or what's left of them. But it would make my little Grinchy heart grow 3 sizes if they miss out here.
And you think that is the slip up against Forest, or do you think that's the slip up against United? Because obviously, if they secured 3 points against United on Friday, which would most likely be a weakened side, that would get them to 66 points. So if they were to secure a win over Forest, they're going to be at 69, and I don't see Villa making up that goal difference at this point, especially because both teams would have to win both matches. So you think Chelsea drops points to Forest, or do you think Chelsea inevitably could drop some points here to United? Because United is one of those weird teams where even with a weakened side, they show up, and they usually show up against the teams in which their supporters expect them to show up against.
So, like, anything's possible. Like they could drop points for United. I guess I'm more looking at the head-to-head with Forest that I think, is like the real opportunity here for Forest to do the business. But you never know, man. You never know. Like I would have never in a million years thought that Forest at home would draw to Leicester. Like just never in a million years. So, and I say that because like I'm kind of just penciling in Villa here because they have, they essentially have Spurs at home and then off to United, 2 teams that are just languishing at the bottom of the table and not look good, despite where they're playing domestically at the cup level. Like, I just feel like I think Villa should roll those sides, but you just never know because I've seen them have bad draws. I've seen them they lost to a West Ham team they had no business losing to. So you just really never know. But if I'm picking a spot here, I'm picking that Forest Chelsea match, and I'm picking Villa to win out here.
Yeah, I like that Villa side. They've hit form at the right time. They're deep. They score goals. They're starting to play better defensively.
Yeah.
And to my point earlier, like this could be so important for Villa to build on. I mean, you get back-to-back Champions League 2 years in a row.
Yeah.
They spent well. They'll have more money to spend. Maybe they make the Rashford deal permanent. Maybe they try to make the Asensio deal permanent. I think they have actual moves to make. The manager has proven that he'll be ruthless. He plays Ollie Watkins here. He benches him out of nowhere. He just says, you know what? Rashford gives us the best chance to win. I'm playing him through the middle. I don't care. I didn't go get this player to sit him on the bench. I'll be damned. I enjoy it. I appreciate it. So real quick, Paul, before I let you go, FA Cup final, Saturday, Crystal Palace versus Manchester City. City has definitely played better over the last month and a half. Quietly, they've gotten themselves in order right up to and including a 0-0 draw, which I do find funny that they found their form as they started to play a version of football that doesn't require trying to force the ball through Holland, and then Holland came back and they couldn't score against the worst team in the league. Maybe at some point they'll realize and listen to our shows where we've basically said he's the best goal scorer in the world who doesn't help you score more goals unless you play your entire setup around him. And Pep plays around his skills but doesn't want to orchestrate his football around one player because he's never done that outside of Messi, which was a player who did it with the ball at his feet, which is different than what Holland needs, right? So give me a prediction. How does it end? I expect the people in light blue with less fans in the ground to probably go home celebrating, but man, am I hoping that parade just rolls out of Wembley and doesn't have to go too far, because maybe no supporter group deserves a day at Wembley more than the Crystal Palace supporters.
Yeah, and part of me looks back at them rolling Villa 3-0 and Villa being in great form and thinking maybe this Palace team just has caught some sort of fire and has some sort of magic in the closet for this competition, right? The other part of me looks at the City side that we know is sort of a shell of its former glory and knows that this is probably the one spot in their season that they can come away with something and feel good about it. I just think the experience and the quality wins out over time. I would have to go City here.
Yeah, I as much as I want to, my heart wants to say Palace. I think they're a really fun side. I think Mateta's had a great season. I think Eze is on the level of getting ready to take the big step forward, no matter where that is. And who knows, that could be at a club like City. He may be auditioning. He may be auditioning to take Kevin De Bruyne's job right now. We'll see where he ends up. I think he'd be, in some ways, I think he'd almost be better served to go play at like United and play in one of those two midfield 10 positions that I think are almost built for him in that Amorim system. I don't want him to go to United because I think he'll be a success. And I only like United signing players like Mason Mount, other players that I stump for and trump for. But then once they fail, I remind everyone I never wanted that fucking shite player. I never wanted him anywhere near the club except for at Liverpool. And I think I said I'd give him number 7 and pay him 200 grand a week. That would have been a mistake. No, I find it to be interesting to see how this match will go. The other part is in classic fashion, I'll talk a little bit about it. We'll preview it, and I won't watch 5 minutes of it because at this point, I don't know why. I'm just kind of falling out of the FA Cup. Maybe it's because I have to stream it through ESPN's website, and it's just crap. And it's the only streaming service I have that makes me look like I'm in 2D, even though I have 4K. I'll figure that out eventually. But for myself and Bickler, thank you for tuning in. If you haven't already, get on over, subscribe, like the pages, do all the good things. Leave us a comment, get involved in the shows. We will be back next week, and we will have more Premier League content all summer long. Thanks, and have a great week.